Hi, my name is Tiffany Grotti, and I'm the Squam Lake project biologist with the Loon Preservation Committee. Thank you so much for volunteering for Loon Chick Watch and helping to protect Squam's loons. Loon Chick Watch is a partnership between the Squam Lakes Association and the Loon Preservation Committee. The goals of Loon Chick Watch are to provide protection for loon families and to improve chick survival on Squam Lake. As I'm sure many of you know, Squam's loons have struggled in recent years, and Loon Chick Watch is a wonderful way that we can all work together to improve the survival of loon chicks on Squam. Another one of our goals is educating lake users about the needs of the loons and helping lake users understand how to boat safely around loons and how we can all work together to help loons thrive on Squam Lake. And the final goal is to collect data on both human disturbances of loons and intrusions by other loons against Squam's loon families. These are both factors that have impacted the survival of loon chicks on Squam, and by gathering data, you will help us better understand the extent of these disturbances for Squam's loon families. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview now of what you do for Loon Chick Watch, and we'll talk in more detail later about how you carry out the protocol for Loon Chick Watch on Squam. We ask people to go out for 1 to 2 hour shifts on busy summer weekends, as well as major holidays such as 4th of July. We ask you to slowly and carefully approach a loon family and position your boat a respectful distance away from the loons. At that point, you will shadow the loons as they move around their territory and protect the loons from approaching boats. You will also educate boaters about the needs of the loons and how they can boat safely around loons and how we can all work together to protect them. So why is Loon Chick Watch important? As I mentioned, Squam's loons have faced many challenges in recent years, and loon chick survival has been very poor. On average, loon productivity in recent years has been less than half the statewide average, and in several years we have had only a single surviving loon chick on Squam. This is certainly something we want to improve to protect our loon population. Many of the stresses that affect loons and loon chicks are anthropogenic. That is, they are caused by humans. The ones that affect loon chicks in particular are boat collisions and disturbances resulting from the close approach of boaters, and we'll talk about those things in more detail. And Loon Chick Watch, of course, is also important because it provides an opportunity to educate lake users about the needs of the loons. One of the guiding philosophies of Loon Preservation Committee is that loons and people can thrive together on lakes as long as we are willing to share the lakes with loons and treat them with respect. And educating lake users about sharing the lakes with loons will certainly help improve the fortunes of Squam's loons and improves the chances for the survival of chicks on Squam Lake. It is on those lakes that we create a culture of respect for loons, that loons can thrive, and that is certainly something we want to have happen on the Squam Lakes. So let's talk about these factors that can affect chick survival. Boat collisions are a major cause of loon chick mortality. They account for about 22% of the causes of death for the chicks whose bodies we are able to recover, and are the second leading known cause of death for loon chicks. So why does this happen? For one thing, chicks are hard to see on the water. They're small, they're dark colored, and they can be very difficult to see when someone is in a speeding oncoming boat. And of course, loon chicks are not able to dive as well as the adult loons. Adult loons are very famous for their diving ability, But loon chicks are just learning, so they are certainly not able to dive as well or as quickly as an adult and get out of the way of an approaching boat. Another factor that makes loon chicks difficult to see is that adults may not be present with loon chicks all the time. In order to feed loon chicks, an adult loon needs to dive, bring up a minnow, and then hand it to the chick. So what that means is that loon chicks may be alone on the surface of the water as an adult loon is diving and looking for a fish to feed them. And if an adult is not with a chick, it may make the chicks that much more difficult for a boater to spot. Loons will also cross coves or cross between islands with loon chicks. Loons are territorial birds, and within those territories, which often encompass one of the larger coves or a grouping of islands, they may have favorite areas where they like to raise the chicks. But unfortunately, some of these favorite areas may be on the opposite sides of a boat lane or a busy cove, and they may have to cross those coves or boat lanes with the loon chicks, putting them in danger of being hit by an oncoming boat or a water skier or a jet ski. Also, loons and chicks do not only spend time by the bright orange caution loon chick signs that the Loon Preservation Committee puts out. I'm sure many of you have seen these bright orange signs that appear on the lake in late summer that say Caution Loon Chicks. Loon Preservation Committee puts out these signs to let people know that there are loon chicks in these areas. It has come to our attention that some people believe that the loons will only be around those signs. This is not the case. We put these signs out around a loon territory that has a chick in it, but the loons may be anywhere within that territory with their chicks. We will certainly put these signs around areas that the loons tend to spend more time in with their chicks, but that doesn't mean that the loons and their chicks will only be by those signs. So how can we prevent these collisions? If you're out doing Loon Chick Watch and you see a boat going in the direction of the loon family, get the attention of that boater. Wave your arms. Wave your paddle if you're in a kayak. If you can do so safely, move in the direction of placing yourself between the boat and the loons while continuing to get the attention of the boater. Once you've gotten the boater to slow down, go out and talk to them, asking them to slow down, keep their eyes open for the loons, and boat carefully in areas of the lake marked with orange chick signs. Also remind them that loons may be anywhere in the areas of the lake marked with chick signs, and that the chicks may be apart from the adult loons. So they need to be watching for chicks as well, and not just the adults. And ask them to not expect the loons to dive out of the way. As we talked about, chicks will not be able to dive out of the way as well as adults. And even with the adults, we do not want to be driving at them at high speed. So ask the boaters when they see a loon or a chick to slow down and give the loons a wide berth to reduce the potential for a collision between a boat and the loons. Let's move on to talk about human disturbance resulting from the close approach of boats, canoes, or kayaks. This can severely stress the loons. And what we have found is that people in canoes and kayaks think that because these are quiet, non-motorized boats, it's okay for them to get close to the loons. And this is not the case at all. In many ways, canoes and kayaks can be more insidious to the loons than speedboats because people are attempting to approach the loons too closely. This can reduce the ability of loons to care for their chicks, resulting in reduced fitness and potential death for the loon chicks. How does this happen? If a boat, say a canoe or kayak, or any type of boat, is approaching the loons too closely, loons will spend their time watching the boats rather than feeding and caring for their chicks. As a result, the chicks don't get enough food. Rather than diving and bringing up food for their chicks, the adults will spend their time on the surface, watching that boat and essentially worrying about what that boat is going to do. In addition, loon chicks that are stressed by the close approach of a boat may refuse to eat, and this can actually go on for hours. It has been demonstrated that after the close approach of a boat that causes stress to a loon chick, several hours may pass before the chick accepts food again from a parent. Loons can also be pushed out of brooding areas by the close approach of boaters. Brooding areas are areas that adults will stay with their chicks. These are areas that are protected from wind and waves with lots of food, so they are safe, prime feeding areas for loons and chicks. If a boat is approaching, loons will swim away from the boat and they may be pushed out of the brooding area into the more open spaces of the lake, which may of course put them at greater risk of a collision with a high-speed boat. So, talking points. Ask people to stay at least 150 feet away from the loons and loon families. This is generally a safe distance at which loons will be able to continue carrying out their normal behaviors and feeding their chicks without too much stress. Now, of course, loons have individual differences, and different loons will have different responses to the close approach of a boater. Some loons may be more sensitive than others. So if a loon is showing stress at that distance, ask people to back away. But generally, 150 feet is a safe distance for the loons. And 150 feet is the no-wake distance, so boaters should be familiar with that. And ask people to be alert for signs of concern or stress on the part of the loons. In many cases, loons will give very subtle indications that they are stressed. It can be a little bit difficult. People need to know what they are looking for to pick up on these indicators. But we'll give you brochures that you can hand out to people that will show these indicators of stress, and we'll talk about them later in this presentation. Of course, when you're interacting with boaters, education is key. We want to teach people about the needs of the loons and educate them. It's an opportunity to help boaters better understand how they can share the lakes with loons in a way that is respectful. We ask you to please not be confrontational with anyone. We're not asking you to get into an argument with anyone or to be angry or to yell at boaters. Remember that you are representing the Squam Lakes Association and the Loon Preservation Committee. And of course, we want to leave a good impression on people. We want this to be educational. So if someone is unwilling to listen to what you have to say, simply thank the people and continue with your loon chick watching. This is not intended to be confrontational in any way. Hopefully your loon chick watch shift will go smoothly, but problems may arise. Be prepared for intense boat traffic. More likely than not, there will be many boats around, and loons will travel with their chicks through heavily traveled boating areas. If and when this happens, please stay calm. Attract the attention of boaters and point at the loons while gesturing for them to slow down. Boaters generally get this message and will slow down and move away from the loons. Once again, above all, stay calm. If possible, do your shift with a buddy, particularly if you are in a kayak or canoe. Having a buddy in another kayak could help position yourselves on either side of the loon family to cover both directions boats may be approaching from, and will give you a little backup. Photographers can be a problem around loons, especially those with chicks. There was a situation last year in which a photographer was too close to a loon family and told a loon chick watcher that he worked for Loon Preservation Committee. This was not true, and it shows the extent that these photographers will go to get their pictures. Loon Preservation Committee does not send out photographers, and even if we did, we would instruct them to observe proper etiquette around loons and to obey instructions of any volunteer loon chick watchers. Photographers need to observe appropriate behaviors around loons, including the 150-foot rule. So treat them as you would any other boater. And don't believe them if they tell you they work for Loon Preservation Committee. If they use that line, simply say, "Then I am sure you know Loon Preservation Committee asks people to maintain a distance of at least 150 feet from the loons," or another similar phrase depending on the circumstances, to indicate that they need to observe respectful behavior around loons. In case of serious loon harassment, such as a boater or jet skier driving circles around loons, repeatedly driving at loons, or the kayaker or photographer who insists on pursuing a loon family at close range, please document the harassment as much as possible and report it to New Hampshire Fish and Game. Remember, loons are a threatened species in New Hampshire, and harassment of loons is illegal and subject to fines. New Hampshire Fish and Game is the agency responsible for enforcing wildlife laws. Please report any harassment to Loon Preservation Committee, but only after you have reported it to Fish and Game. Loon Preservation Committee does not have any legal power to enforce wildlife laws, so New Hampshire Fish and Game needs to be your first call. In these extreme cases, please do not interact with the offender beyond your first initial attempt to educate them. As we said before, Loon Chick Watch is an educational program, and we do not want you to get involved in a confrontation with someone who insists on harassing loons. We hope you will never see harassment of this degree, but if it does happen, please report it to Fish and Game and document it as much as possible. In the case of a motorized boat, get a bow number if possible. This drawing shows you the location of bow numbers. If you can discreetly get a photograph of the bow number, or the incident as a whole, or a video of the boater, do so. But don't let the person see you taking the picture, as that could lead to a confrontation. And then call New Hampshire Fish and Game. Here are the emergency numbers that you should take out in the boat with you. If you have a situation where you feel boat traffic is potentially getting dangerous, please call Marine Patrol. And use the Fish and Game number for cases of extreme or dangerous loon harassment. We do not expect that you will need to use these numbers, but we provide them for you just in case. And of course, in the case of a personal emergency, please call 911 or Marine Patrol. Let's talk a little bit about the protocol for Loon Chick Watch. We ask people to go out in shifts of 1 to 2 hours and slowly and carefully approach the loon family and position your boat a respectful distance away from them. So once again, keep at least a 150-foot radius around the loons. That should be a safe distance, unless the loons indicate otherwise. Shadow the family as they move around the territory so that you are always in proximity to them and could intervene if a boat approaches the loons, but of course not causing any interference of your own to what the loons are doing or causing them any stress. We ask you to fill out a data log to tabulate the number of boater interactions as well as any loon interactions, which I'll talk about in a second. This will help us understand the amount of disturbance that the loons are dealing with. And as you're collecting this data, we ask you to intervene in any situations that might be dangerous or stressful for the loons, and to educate boaters about the needs of the loons and how we can all work together to protect them. This is an example of the volunteer log that you'll be filling out. At the top, we ask you to give us the location, date, and time of the shift that you're doing. Under boating activity, place a tick in the appropriate box for each boat that you see in close proximity to the loons while you're carrying out your Loon Chick Watch. This is not only for the boats that you felt the need to intervene if they are approaching the loons or if they were within that 150-foot radius, but please put a tick for a boat that has been in the general vicinity of the loons. And then for the lower part of that data form, these are cases where you are intervening. Please give us the time, the type of boat, and then let us know if you distributed some of the brochures in your outreach packet. And when you sign up for Loon Chick Watch, the Squam Lakes Association will give you a packet with some behavior brochures, some brochures on the problems of lead fishing tackle, and some non-lead fishing tackle that you can give out to boaters. And we ask you to write in some comments about loon behaviors or reactions to the boats, as well as interactions that you had with any boaters. Whatever you can note that could shed light on the reactions of the loons to whatever was happening around them, or the reactions of the boaters to the information you were supplying them. We also ask you to note down the time and nature of the encounter if there was a loon intrusion while you were with the family. This is a situation where a loon that is not part of the family may intrude into the territory and try to start a fight with the family. If you see that happening, please fill that in on the volunteer log as well. Of course, we want to make sure that Loon Chick Watch is beneficial to the loons and does not cause additional harm or stress to them. So we all need to be very careful when carrying out Loon Chick Watch, not to approach the loons too closely or impinge on their ability to care for their chicks. As Judy Silverberg of New Hampshire Fish and Game once said, if you cause an animal to change its behavior, you have already impacted that animal. And that is certainly not something that we want to have happening during Loon Chick Watch. So please be careful when doing Chick Watch. Please do not approach the loons too closely, and please be alert for signs of stress on the part of the loons. If you notice the loons are displaying indications of stress, or if they start slowly swimming away from you, they are letting you know that you have gotten too close. If that happens, please back away. Let the loons resume their normal behavior, and just remember not to approach at that distance again. We want to make sure the loons can go about their normal behaviors while we are doing Loon Chick Watch. Signs that you are too close to the loons include if the loons swim slowly or even just drift away from you. This indicates you have gotten too close. As I mentioned before, loons tend to be very subtle, so it may be a very slow drift. And in fact, you may not even notice it at first. You may just suddenly notice that the loons are a lot farther away from you than they were before. It may not appear to you to be a purposeful drift or swimming away, but that is something they will do, so please be very mindful and watchful for that. If either the loons deliberately swim away from you or you suddenly realize they are farther away, these are both indications that you are too close to the loons. Also, if you notice the loons are looking at you and not resuming their normal behavior, that can certainly be a sign that they're concerned about you and have interrupted whatever they were doing before and are watching you to see what you're going to do next. In that case, of course, you also want to back away from the loons. If you see indications of stress, and we'll talk about what these are in just a second, but remember, loons will give very subtle indications of stress. Because loons are so famous for their calls, many people believe that if loons are under stress, they'll be making all sorts of raucous calls. Sometimes they will vocalize. If they do, you certainly want to move away. But many of their indications of stress are much more subtle than that, and it's something you need to look carefully for. We'll give you a brochure very similar to this, And this is something you can distribute to boaters while you're doing Loon Chick Watch, but it's also something for your own reference. I want you to especially notice the middle column of concerned loons. These are all positions loons will go into to indicate they're concerned, nervous, or feeling threatened. If we look at the top picture under the concerned loon column, notice the little bump on the forehead of that loon. They've raised their feathers on the forehead to create what looks like a bump, and this loon is feeling stressed. Normally a loon's forehead is smooth, like in the middle picture of the relaxed loons column. If a loon raises the feathers on its forehead, that loon is letting you know it's stressed. Loons will also stretch up their neck, as you see the loon doing in the middle picture under the concerned loons column, or lower its head right over the water, as you see in the bottom picture. Both a loon with its neck stretched up or its head lowered over the water is feeling stressed or threatened, and you certainly want to back away. So as I said, loons can give subtle indications of stress. They're not all obvious. But we'll give you copies of this brochure, and you can both keep one for your own reference and distribute some to other boaters while you're doing Loon Chick Watch. Positioning your boat is also very important to keeping loons safe. Loons with chicks will often brood their chicks near a shoreline. Do not go between the loons and the shoreline. This would result in the loons being pushed out into the middle more, away from the protection of shore and more into boating traffic. If a loon family is along a shoreline, always position your boat on the outside of the loon family, so they are between you and the shore, and you are between the loons and the main route of boat traffic. If the loon family is out in the middle of a cove or boat lane, simply shadow them as they cross the open water and be alert for speeding boats. Loon Chick Watch is designed to help loons cope with human pressures, especially human recreational pressures. We ask you to please not interfere with any natural disturbance events. The focus is on human impacts. We need to remember that loons are wild animals, and we don't want you to interfere with any natural circumstances. Of course, we have asked you to note any loon intrusions on your volunteer log, but we ask you not to interfere with those. This is loons doing what loons do, and we want them to carry out those natural behaviors. And we want to better understand the rate of those intrusions on the lake, but we ask you not to intervene. Interventions are not successful in these circumstances. Loons are determined, so if you have an intruding loon, you will not be able to stop that intrusion, and at worst, a loon could get hurt from any attempted intervention. So we ask you not to interfere during loon intrusions, simply to report them. We only ask you to intervene when there is a human factor going on, such as an oncoming speedboat or the close approach of boaters. We also ask you to please not disclose the location of the loon families to others. This is very important. This is, of course, for the protection and safety of the loons. We do not want to draw attention to these loons and thus increase the rate of boats going into those areas and potentially disturbing them. We are so grateful to you for volunteering to do Loon Chick Watch. It's a really important way to protect the loons, but we do ask you not to disclose their locations. We're providing you with these locations because we know you want to help the loons, and we ask you to please use that information responsibly for the protection and safety of the loons. And of course, we're not only concerned about the safety of the loons, we're concerned about your safety as well. Please follow all the normal rules of the water as established by Marine Patrol. Wear a life jacket, especially if you are in a kayak or canoe. And of course, weather is a very important factor. If you are signed up for a shift and the weather is looking threatening, please do not go out. If you're already out doing Loon Chick Watch and there is thunder or lightning, please leave the water immediately. If you feel at all uncomfortable about the weather or any other safety issue, Please do not go out for your shift. We want all of our Loon Chick Watchers to stay safe. So thank you so much for helping to protect Squam's loons by volunteering for Loon Chick Watch, and happy chick watching. Spending an hour or two with a loon family is an amazing experience and an amazing thing to have an opportunity to do. Enjoy it and know that you're doing something very important to help Squam's loons. Loon Preservation Committee and Squam Lakes Association, thank you so much for volunteering. And we want to thank Alex Constan for the use of his photos in this presentation. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you to all of you for volunteering, and happy chick watching to you all.